We're joined here on FlowFM. He's a long way from the Mallee Highway. Tony Pasin, he's over in Canberra for the resumption of sittings. Tony, how's it all going over there?
Well, we've started another sitting year, Ricky, and this is a year where the pressure's on the Labor Party to take real pressure off your listeners' cost of living, and I'm hoping they can, because quite frankly, Australians are hurting, and we didn't get off to a good start yesterday with the Reserve Bank putting mortgage rates up again.
Yeah, and there's a lot of pressure on the government on this $275 they promised on energy bills, but certainly one thing that we're putting the focus on is on the cost of their fuel. You've moved a motion in the Parliament as well on fuel tax, but we need to talk more broadly on what they're going to do to farmers' diesel rebate.
Well, starting on the diesel rebate, the drums in Canberra seem to be beating on the abolition of the diesel fuel rebate. Now, why do I know that? Well, the Grattan Institute, so Ricky, is effectively a third arm of the Labor Party, have published a report calling for this.
Well, I think they called for it to be halved, didn't they, Pony?
Well, it's a slippery slope, Ricky. There's a lot of talk up here in Canberra that, when I raised it with a few more sensible members of the Labor Party yesterday, they said, potentially mining, the mining industry. Well, the reality is any movement of the diesel fuel rebate, which effectively ensures that fuel excises operate as user charges on roads, will be an attack on Australian agriculture, because it'll apply to mining today but agriculture tomorrow. The basic principle is a clear one. I mean, fuel taxes or taxes raised on fuel should be raised on vehicles that use roads. So farm, plant equipment, tractors, commercial fishing vessels, mining equipment that doesn't get off the mine site shouldn't have to pay the diesel fuel excise. And so we have a system in this country where if you pay it up front, but you get a rebate of that excise if you're using your diesel off-road.
Well, it's the same principle being applied, isn't it? And when it comes to electric vehicles, state governments have been looking to tax them because they are using the road, but being EVs, they're not paying for the cost because they're not paying for fuel.
Well, that's right. This is going to be a challenge as electric vehicles become more popular. Ricky, governments are going to have to deal with how we tax them, because obviously they don't use fuel and therefore aren't contributing to fuel taxes. An average household, by the way, contributes $1,188 a year in fuel taxes at the Bowser. And on a separate concern of mine, currently only 91% of that money is spent on our land transport infrastructure, and that's declining over the course of the next 12 months to 88%. I don't understand why Australians who begrudgingly pay this tax at the Bowser, and I think, let's face it, we all do begrudgingly pay it at the Bowser because it comes at the cost of something else in our lives. The very least we can do is ensure that every single cent of that $1,188 per annum is spent on our road network to make it safer and more productive.
Yeah, I want to come back to that and the wonderful word called hypothecation, but just that chatter around the corridors, we're coming back to the farmers and the diesel fuel tax rebate. You say, well, maybe the chatter quietly is it'll be targeting the mining industry, which isn't great when you consider mining's been a big contributor to our economy. But also, is it because the government is somewhat attached at the hip? They're only one seat away from minority government, to the Greens and the Teals in Parliament, who have always railed in the Green sense against this idea that, there's a rebate for fossil fuels.
Well, I think that's what's motivating some of this endeavour. The reality is I've feared for a long time that Treasury has had its eyes on abolishing this rebate. I remember, I think it was about 2015, Joe Hockey mooted the idea before he was slapped down by his backbench, including myself and the mining industry. It seems as though Treasury, with a new Treasurer, thinks they might have another crack at this idea. But the other concern I've got about this, aside from the fact that it will really punish Australian farmers, is that this can have no other effect other than to be inflationary, Ricky. And, because if farmers have to spend more to grow the products they grow that effectively are converted by manufacturers to foods on our grocery shelves, those groceries have to be more expensive. And at a time where I think the government should be doing everything within its power to put downward pressure on prices, whether it's in the supermarket or, our mortgage bills, electricity bills, otherwise, this is a measure which will have the direct opposite effect. And this is why I spent a fair bit of yesterday's question time not only asking some direct questions about energy prices increasing in my electorate, and I should note that Nippies are facing a 92.5% increase in their electricity bill. That's a $900,000 increase. That's got to be passed on. But also asking, well, why are you making a difficult situation worse? And removing this excise will do exactly that. It will put upward pressure on prices. We know it's difficult at the moment to make ends meet. This will make it worse.
Well, the only tool the Reserve Bank of Australia has is the one they used yesterday to raise rates again by another 25 basis points to try and contain inflation. And the ratings agency S&P Global yesterday indicated Australia with New Zealand and the Philippines are outliers in our region. We've got roaring inflation, but the other parts of the region don't. So it does fall on the government, doesn't it, to try and contain inflationary pressure?
That's right. And the last time the cash rate was at 3.35% was 2012. What else is consistent with 2012? Oh, that's right. We had a Labor government. I mean, this mob yesterday were just basically going around the house and in question time saying, you know what, we're just out of luck. Every time we come to government, interest rates go up. They haven't made the causal connection yet, right? Like, the reality is the policy levers they pull when they're in government, the abolition of the ABCC, other pressures around wage increases, are doing exactly what they're intended to do, drive up the cost of labour. That in turn is driving up the cost of all other inputs, and it's putting inflationary pressure into the system. I mean, it's not... my daughter's 12 and she's worked it out, so I just wonder why, the Federal Treasurer, Jim Chalmers, who apparently is working on a new form of capitalism, hasn't.
Well, maybe there's a future for her in Treasury. Just before we finish,
no.
I want to get back to this topic of hypothecation, which is really just, like you said earlier, that every cent of fuel tax that's raised at the Bowser for diesel, unleaded and the like is spent on our roads. You say that percentage is falling. It's been falling for some time, hasn't it? And where is that money otherwise going in terms of spending from Treasury and whoever's in government?
Well, it goes into general revenue. All of this money goes into general revenue and some proportion of it comes out. The problem is that proportion, as you say, Ricky, has been steadily declining. It's currently 91%. It's scheduled to be 88% across the forwards. I think Australians think that's a raw deal. I mean, as I said, they pay this tax at the Bowser begrudgingly. The very least decision makers like myself and government can do is make sure that exactly what they contribute in fuel taxes for the repair and maintenance of our road network is actually spent on repair and maintenance of the road network. To do otherwise, I think, is unconscionable, and I've set the challenge to the Labor Party to fix it. I'm not the only person calling for this. The AAA, which is the peak motorist body in Australia, whose members include the likes of the RAA, the RACV, the RAQ, are calling for this as well. And I would prefer to see more than that spent on our road network. It's in a shocking state of repair, particularly because of the extraordinary wet period we've had over the last 12 months. But at the very least we can do is make sure 100% of those taxes that are paid at the Bowser are spent repairing and maintaining our road network.
Well, there's plenty of important work there as the Shadow Assistant Minister for Infrastructure and Transport, and of course as the member for Barker as well. Tony Pasin, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks for your time, Ricky.